I had spent weeks preparing for Serafina's baby shower. My home, the one William and I had built together, was filled with balloons and pastel ribbons. Every detail, from the tiny frosted cookies shaped like baby carriages to the elegant floral arrangements, had been lovingly overseen by me. I wanted it to be perfect for my son, Arthur, and his wife, Serafina. She was carrying up my first grandchild after all, and despite our often strained relationship, I had hoped this joyous occasion would bring us closer. I remembered the laughter, the gentle chatter, the oohs and ahs over the miniature onesies and tiny clothes. It was, for a moment, exactly what I had dreamed a family celebration should be. Then came the toasts. Several guests offered sweet sentiments, well wishes for the parents-to-be and the coming baby. Serafina, glowing in a flowing maternity dress that accentuated her pregnancy, took a sip of her sparkling cider and raised her glass. A hush fell over the room, eager for her words. She smiled a little too brightly, her eyes darting to mine for a fraction of a second before sweeping across the room. "Thank you all for celebrating with us," she began, her voice clear and carrying. "Arthur and I are so excited for this new chapter." And she paused, her gaze locking onto me then, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "We've already figured out the perfect solution for the baby's room. When the old lady goes to the nursing home, her room becomes the nursery." A stunned silence descended upon the room, thick and suffocating. The festive air evaporated, replaced by an uncomfortable void. My smile, which moments ago felt genuine, froze on my face. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. Every eye in the room, it seemed, turned to me. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, a blush of profound humiliation. I searched for Arthur, my son, my only child. He stood beside Serafina, his face pale, a glass halfway to his lips. He lowered it slowly, his gaze fixed on the floor. "Serafina," he mumbled, his voice barely audible. "That's not appropriate." His words were weak, hollow, a performative whisper that offered no real defense, no true outrage. It was too little, too late. The damage was done. Serafina, meanwhile, merely chuckled, a dismissive sound, and took another sip of her drink, as if she had just shared the most delightful secret. Decades of standing before classrooms, commanding attention, had taught me the invaluable skill of composure. As a former English teacher, I knew how to maintain an outward calm, even when my internal world was crumbling. I forced my lips into a thin, tight smile. I nodded as if her pronouncement was an amusing little joke, a harmless jest. But inside, a searing pain spread through me. It wasn't just the insult, it was the feeling of being erased, of being designated obsolete and disposable in my own home, the home I had always envisioned as a sanctuary for my family, now explicitly earmarked for my departure. My legacy, my history, was being scrubbed away to make room for hers. My dearest friend, Beatrice, who had been a loyal companion since college, rushed to my side almost immediately. Her hand found mine, a comforting squeeze that spoke volumes. "Eleanor, are you all right?" she whispered, her brow furrowed with genuine concern. Her eyes, usually sparkling with life and laughter, were filled with a raw sympathy that I found almost unbearable. I couldn't bear to let her see the extent of my humiliation, to acknowledge how deeply Serafina's words had cut. "Of course, dear," I lied, my voice a little too bright, a little too steady. "Serafina just has a peculiar sense of humor, doesn't she? Pregnancy hormones, perhaps." Beatrice looked doubtful, her gaze lingering on my face, but she squeezed my hand again, a silent promise of unwavering support. The rest of the shower passed in a blur of forced smiles and strained pleasantries. As the last guest departed, the silence in the house was heavy, punctuated only by the rustle of wrapping paper and the clinking of dishes being put away. I began to clear away the remnants of the celebration, systematically gathering gifts, deflating balloons, and stacking plates. Arthur approached me, looking awkward and undeniably guilty. "Mom, let me help you with that," he offered, gesturing vaguely at a pile of discarded napkins. His offer was tentative, half-hearted, more out of obligation than genuine care. I shook my head, not looking at him, my focus fixed on a sticky patch on the floor. "It's fine, Arthur," I said, my voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "I've got it." I didn't want his help. I didn't want his pity. I wanted to be left alone with my wounded pride to process the blunt force trauma of Serafina's public declaration. I moved through the rooms, picking up confetti, the bright colors mocking my somber mood. Since William passed 5 years ago, this house had felt both too big and too empty. He had been the anchor, the laughter, the steady presence that filled every corner. After his death, I had tried desperately to find a new purpose, to not be a burden. I had thrown myself into being helpful to Arthur and Serafina. I cooked their meals, organized their appointments, even managed their finances when Arthur's demanding job consumed all his time. I was their unpaid assistant, their live-in caretaker, all in an effort to prove my worth, to demonstrate that I was not old, not expendable. I wanted to be useful, to be needed, to be part of their lives, not just a guest in my own home. But Serafina's toast had ripped away that illusion. I wasn't useful, I was an inconvenience. I wasn't needed. I had an expiration date stamped on me, a deadline for my removal. The image of a calendar marked with a bold red X flashed in my mind. It was a brutal awakening. I remembered William, his strong hand in mine, his booming laugh filling the kitchen. He had always told me, "Eleanor, don't let anyone walk all over you. You're stronger than you think. Stand up for yourself." His words echoed in the quiet house, a phantom whisper of encouragement. I had always been so gentle, so accommodating, but in that moment, I realized that my kindness had been misinterpreted as weakness. As I scrubbed a spilled drink from the pristine white tablecloth, a different kind of warmth began to spread through me, not shame, but a slow, simmering anger. And with it, a spark of resolve. My mind, sharp and analytical from years of literary analysis, began to connect disparate pieces. Serafina, her suspicious behavior, the hushed phone call she took in the garden, her voice low and conspiratorial, always ending abruptly if I came too close. The times she claimed to be at yoga or a mommy group, but returned hours later, smelling faintly of an unfamiliar perfume, her hair slightly disheveled. The way she would snatch the mail from the box before I could even glance at it, her movements quick, almost furtive, as if concealing something. I had dismissed these things before, attributing them to her desire for privacy, her quirky personality. Now they screamed of something more sinister. A sudden clarity washed over me. This wasn't just about a tactless toast. This was about power, about control, about Serafina's blatant desire to usurp my place, not just in this house, but in Arthur's life. And I wouldn't stand for it. Not anymore. William's words resonated with newfound meaning. I looked around the familiar rooms, at the bookshelves crammed with stories, the worn armchair where he used to read to me, the faint scent of his pipe tobacco clinging to the curtains. This was my home, and I would not be pushed out of it. Serafina had a secret, I was certain of it. And I, Eleanor Vance, the old lady destined for a nursing home, would uncover it. This was no longer just about survival. It was about reclaiming my dignity, my home, my life. And I would start by finding out exactly what Serafina was hiding. The morning after the baby shower, I woke with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. The dull ache of humiliation was still present, a tender bruise on my soul, but it was now overshadowed by a sharper, colder emotion. Resolve. William's voice, like a distant echo, reminded me to stand up for myself. I would not let Serafina dictate my future, not in my own home. And to do that, I needed answers. My English teacher's mind, always good at parsing subtext and finding hidden meanings, now focused entirely on Serafina. I would observe, analyze, and uncover whatever it was she was so desperately trying to hide. Arthur left for work as usual, kissing Serafina goodbye at the door. For his benefit, she maintained her saccharine sweetness, her voice light and innocent, full of promises of a quiet day at home, perhaps baking cookies. But the moment his car pulled out of the driveway, the transformation was stark. The mask of sweet deference she wore for Arthur slipped away like a discarded costume. Her shoulders straightened, her lips thinned, and a calculating glint entered her eyes. "I'm going out," she announced, her tone clipped, as if daring me to question her. "Don't wait up for lunch." I watched, stunned, as she went to her closet and emerged minutes later, not in comfortable maternity wear, but in a stylish dress and a pair of surprisingly high heels. Heels, despite being heavily pregnant and claiming to be suffering from swollen ankles. It was a small detail, but it screamed incongruity. Over the next 2 weeks, a pattern emerged, a tapestry of subtle deceptions that, when woven together, painted an increasingly unsettling picture. Serafina would leave almost daily, always with vague explanations. "I'm meeting a friend for coffee," she'd say, but return hours later with no coffee cup in sight, her purse conspicuously bulging. Or, "I have a new mother's support group," she'd announce, yet she'd arrive home with designer shopping bags, clearly not from a support group meeting. These were not innocent errands. One afternoon, her mother, Genevieve, called. I answered, as Serafina was out on one of her mysterious excursions. We chatted pleasantly for a few minutes. "Oh," I mentioned casually, "Serafina said she was having lunch with you today." There was a beat of silence on the other end, then a small, puzzled laugh. "Lunch with me? Oh no, dear, I haven't seen Serafina all week. I wish I had. What a silly girl." The phone call ended, but the echo of Genevieve's confusion resonated in my ears. Serafina was lying, deliberately and frequently, and not just to Arthur. The burden of my growing suspicions weighed heavily on me. I needed to confide in someone, to articulate these disjointed observations. Beatrice was the obvious choice. We met for tea at our usual quiet cafe. "Beatrice," I began, my voice low, leaning across the table. "I'm worried about Serafina. She's different when Arthur isn't around. The way she looks at me, the way she speaks, and the phone calls." I recounted the hushed conversations, the immediate hang-ups, the sudden shifts in her personality. "It's like she has another life, Beatrice, one she's meticulously hiding from us." Beatrice listened patiently, stirring her tea, her gaze sympathetic but also a little hesitant. "Eleanor, my dear," she said gently, "I know what Serafina said at the shower was dreadful. Perhaps you're feeling a bit sensitive right now. It's natural to be hurt and to see things through that lens." She was suggesting I was overreacting, that the humiliation of the shower was coloring my perception. I shook my head, my resolve hardening. "No, Beatrice," I insisted, my voice firm. "This isn't just about the shower. That was a catalyst, yes, it made me look. But what I'm seeing now, these inconsistencies, these lies, they started long before that toast. This is something else entirely, something dark." Just a few days later, my suspicions were brutally confirmed. I was in the kitchen, making a pot of tea, when I heard Serafina's voice from the living room, sharp and low. She thought I was upstairs. "He doesn't suspect anything," she said, her tone smug, confident. "He's completely oblivious." Then a rustle, a click, and silence. She had hung up abruptly. My blood ran cold. "He doesn't suspect anything. He, Arthur, my son." The words hung in the air, a poisonous vapor. Serafina was actively deceiving Arthur, and she was gloating about it. That same afternoon, as I was sorting through the mail that had just arrived, a thick, cream-colored envelope caught my eye. It was addressed to Serafina, but the return address was a law firm I didn't recognize. Sterling and Associates. Before I could even fully register the name, Serafina appeared at my elbow, a sudden, startling presence. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on the letter in my hand, and her face went chalk white. "My mail!" she gasped, her voice unnaturally high-pitched. She snatched it from my hand with surprising force, clutching it to her chest as if it were a precious, fragile secret. "Don't you ever touch my mail, Eleanor!" she hissed, her eyes blazing with an intensity I hadn't seen before. Then she turned on her heel and practically ran upstairs. The encounter left me shaken, but also more certain than ever that a significant secret was being kept, and that Sterling and Associates held a key. That night, sleep eluded me. Serafina's rage, the cryptic phone call, the mysterious law firm letter, it all swirled in my mind. I needed more than fragments. I needed proof. After midnight, when the house was utterly silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator, I made a decision. I crept out of my room, my bare feet silent on the carpeted stairs. I knew Arthur was a heavy sleeper, and Serafina, pregnant and exhausted, usually slept soundly too. With a pounding heart, I pushed open their bedroom door. It was dark, illuminated only by the faint glow of the streetlights outside. I moved cautiously, my eyes scanning the nightstand, the dresser, and then I saw it. A small black leather address book, tucked neatly beneath a pile of magazines on Serafina's side of the bed. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for it. Flipping through the pages, my breath hitched. There, scrawled in Serafina's elegant handwriting, was a name that appeared repeatedly, listed under various phone numbers and even an email address. Marcus Thorne. It was there on 3 different pages, marked with little stars and hearts beside it. A cold dread began to settle in my stomach. Back in my room, the glow of my laptop screen was a stark contrast to the darkness outside. I typed Marcus Thorne into the search bar, my fingers stiff with apprehension. The results appeared almost instantly. A Facebook profile photo, a smiling man with dark hair and kind eyes. And then, the photos. My heart plummeted into my stomach. Photo after photo, spanning years, showed Marcus Thorne and Serafina together. Not as friends, but as a couple. Embracing, holding hands, kissing. Beach vacations, candlelit dinners, holiday gatherings. And the dates. My gaze froze on a series of pictures uploaded just 8 months ago, showing Serafina and Marcus in what appeared to be a romantic getaway, laughing, arms around each other. Arthur and Serafina had been married for just over a year, but they had been together for approximately a year and a half before that. Doing the math, my mind reeled. A year and a half, 8 months ago. The timelines overlapped brutally, undeniably. Serafina had been with Marcus Thorne for a significant portion of her relationship with Arthur. A deep, sickening wave of betrayal washed over me. Not for myself, but for my son. This wasn't just about a room in my house. This was about a profound deception, a betrayal that cut to the very core of my son's marriage. The baby, my grandchild. A horrifying question formed in my mind, too terrible to voice. The revelation of Marcus Thorne and the overlapping timelines had left me reeling. The morning after my clandestine investigation, I felt a desperate need to confirm what I knew, or at least to plant a seed of doubt in Arthur's mind. With trembling hands, I called him at work, trying to keep my voice steady, innocent. "Arthur, dear," I began, "I just saw an old photo of Serafina, and there was a man in it. Marcus Thorne, I think his name was. Just wondering who he was." There was a pause on the other end, a slight crackle of static, then Arthur's voice, tinged with impatience. "Mom, really? Marcus? He's just an old ex-boyfriend from ages ago. Ancient history. What does it matter?" He sounded dismissive, annoyed. "Look, Mom, Serafina's pregnant and stressed. We don't need you digging up old boyfriends or creating any problems. Just try to be supportive, please. We have enough on our plates." His words were a clear warning, a wall erected between me and the truth. He wouldn't even consider the possibility that Serafina was anything less than perfect. He was blind, and I realized then that I couldn't rely on him to see what was happening. I was on my own. I hung up, the receiver heavy in my hand. A wave of loneliness washed over me. How I wished William were here. His pragmatic mind, his unwavering loyalty, his ability to cut through nonsense. He would have known what to do, what to say. I walked into the living room, my gaze falling on the mantelpiece where a framed photo of William and me stood. It was taken years ago when I was pregnant with Arthur, my belly a sweet, round curve beneath my dress. William's arm protectively around me, his face beaming with pride. We looked so young, so full of hope. A single tear traced a path down my cheek, a silent testament to the grief and yearning that still resided within me. Just then, my phone buzzed. It was a text message, not for me, but for Serafina, left open on the kitchen counter where she had carelessly abandoned it. My heart pounded as I read it. "Appointment confirmed. Dr. Lowe, tomorrow, 10 a.m. Dr. Lowe? My mind immediately went to her regular obstetrician, Dr. Gupta. Serafina had appointments with Dr. Gupta every few weeks, and I often drove her. There was no Dr. Lowe in her medical rotation. This wasn't a doctor's appointment for the baby. This was something else entirely. The text message solidified my suspicion of a deeper secret, a meticulously guarded truth she was keeping from us all. A cold determination settled in my bones. I would follow her. I would uncover what Serafina was hiding, no matter what it took. The next morning, I feigned a headache, claiming I needed to rest. Serafina, too absorbed in her own plans, merely grunted in response, happy to leave without me. I watched from my bedroom window as she emerged from the house, transformed. She wore oversized sunglasses that hid half her face, a wide-brimmed scarf tied dramatically around her head, obscuring her distinctive blonde hair. She looked less like a pregnant woman going to a doctor's appointment and more like someone trying to evade detection. She hailed a taxi rather than taking her usual car, adding another layer to the enigma. I waited a few minutes, then quietly slipped out, calling my own taxi. "Follow that cab," I instructed the driver, feeling a strange mix of exhilaration and dread. The chase was short. The taxi pulled up in front of a modern, glass-fronted medical building downtown. Serafina, still heavily disguised, hurried inside. I paid my driver and followed, my heart hammering against my ribs. Once inside, I cautiously approached the building directory. My eyes scanned the listings, looking for Dr. Lowe. I found no such name. Instead, my gaze fell upon Sterling and Associates, Suite 304, listed beneath the name Mr. Edward Sterling, family law attorney. A jolt went through me. Sterling and Associates, the law firm from the letter Serafina had so frantically snatched away. The pieces of the puzzle were beginning to fit together, forming a picture far more disturbing than I had ever imagined. This was not a doctor's office. This was a lawyer's office. I took the elevator to the third floor, my composure firmly in place. The hallway was quiet, hushed, the air thick with an unspoken gravitas. I found Suite 304. The door was a frosted glass panel, opaque enough to obscure clear vision, but translucent enough to hint at activity within. I pushed open the door to the reception area. A young woman with bright red hair sat behind a gleaming mahogany desk, typing busily. Her name tag read Lisa. "Excuse me," I said, adopting a slightly flustered, apologetic tone. "I'm so terribly sorry I must be running late. I'm Eleanor Vance. I believe I'm meant to be meeting my niece, Serafina, for her appointment with Mr. Sterling." I feigned a confused elderly aunt act, hoping to elicit information without raising suspicion. Lisa looked up, a pleasant but professional smile on her face. She glanced at her computer screen. "Ah, Mrs. Vance, yes, Serafina is indeed with Mr. Sterling right now. She's just gone in." Her words confirmed it. Serafina was in a lawyer's office, meeting with a family law attorney. My stomach churned. "Oh, wonderful," I managed, forcing a smile. "I'll just wait here then." I sat on one of the plush leather chairs, pretending to be engrossed in a magazine, but my eyes were fixed on the frosted glass door. Through the translucent pane, I could just make out a silhouette, undeniably Serafina's, her pregnant profile unmistakable. She was there, in a family law attorney's office, discussing who knew what. Minutes stretched into an eternity. I contemplated what this could mean. Divorce? A prenuptial agreement gone wrong? But why the secrecy, the lies, the elaborate disguise? And why a family law attorney when Arthur had no inkling of any marital discord? My mind raced, trying to grasp the implications. Just as I was about to abandon my post, feeling that I had gathered enough information for now, the elevator doors chimed and slid open. I glanced up, intending to leave. My breath caught in my throat. Stepping out of the elevator, impeccably dressed, a briefcase in hand, was Marcus Thorne, the very man from the Facebook photos, the one Arthur had dismissed as ancient history. He didn't see me, his gaze fixed on the door to Sterling and Associates. Without hesitation, he walked directly to the frosted glass door and let himself in. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. My head spun as the alarming pieces of the puzzle snapped into place with sickening precision. Serafina, her ex-boyfriend, Marcus Thorne, a family law attorney, all together in secret. The implications were too devastating to ignore. This wasn't just about Serafina's infidelity. This was about something far more calculated, something that threatened to unravel Arthur's entire life. The baby, my grandchild. The horrifying question that had formed in my mind before now screamed for an answer. Was this baby even Arthur's? That evening, the dinner table felt like a stage for a macabre play. Arthur and Serafina chattered animatedly about nursery colors, debating between soft greens and gentle yellows, their voices a discordant symphony against the tumultuous chaos in my mind. Serafina, her face glowing with a counterfeit maternal warmth, even asked my opinion on a particularly whimsical wallpaper pattern. I merely nodded, offering a tight, noncommittal smile, my gaze fixed on my plate. Each word they spoke felt like a fresh stab, each innocent mention of our baby a cruel twist of the knife. I could barely swallow the food, my throat tight with a mixture of fear, anger, and profound sadness for my son. Arthur, usually oblivious, eventually noticed my unusual silence. "Mom, you're awfully quiet tonight," he observed, a slight frown creasing his brow. "Everything all right? You barely touched your casserole." I forced a weary sigh, hoping to sound convincing. "Just a bit tired, dear," I mumbled, pushing my plate away. "A long day." Serafina merely shrugged, seemingly content with my vague explanation, already engrossed in showing Arthur another picture of a crib. Later, after Serafina had retired to their bedroom, claiming fatigue, Arthur lingered in the kitchen as I meticulously cleaned. "Mom," he began, his voice softer now, a hint of genuine concern. "You've been acting strangely since the shower. Is it still about what Serafina said? Because I told you no one is sending you to a nursing home." He sounded almost earnest, but the underlying cluelessness was heartbreaking. My heart ached to tell him everything, to rip away the veil of his blissful ignorance, but the words caught in my throat. How could I shatter his world with such a monstrous truth? How could I explain that the woman he loved, the mother of his unborn child, was a deceitful viper? I hesitated, the enormity of the betrayal too heavy to simply blurt out. Just as I was about to attempt to voice some fragment of my concerns, his phone chimed loudly from the countertop. He glanced at the screen, his expression immediately shifting to one of mild alarm. "A work emergency," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I have to go." The conversation was abruptly cut short, the opportunity lost, leaving me with the suffocating weight of my secret. He patted my shoulder, a gesture that felt utterly superficial given the circumstances, and rushed off, leaving me alone once again in the silent, treacherous house. The next morning, fortified by a sleepless night and a potent brew of coffee, I made a call, not to a friend, but to a former colleague from my teaching days, a quiet man named Thomas Miller. After an illustrious career in law enforcement, Thomas had retired from the police force a few years back and started a private investigation firm. I had always admired his keen intellect and unwavering integrity. "Thomas," I said, my voice carefully modulated, "I need your help with something. Sensitive, extremely sensitive." He listened patiently as I laid out my observations, the inconsistencies, the phone calls, the law firm, and the shocking discovery of Marcus Thorne. His voice, calm and professional, assured me he would look into it. 2 days later, Thomas Miller arrived at my door, a somber expression on his face. He carried a discreet manila envelope, its contents feeling heavy with untold truths. We sat in the living room, the same room where Serafina had made her cruel toast, the air thick with unspoken tension. "Eleanor," he began, his voice low, "I've confirmed most of your suspicions, and then some." He slid the envelope across the coffee table toward me. "Serafina has indeed been regularly meeting with Marcus Thorne," he continued, his words like hammer blows. "Not just for coffee. They've been seen together at various locations, including a downtown hotel on several occasions. And as for Sterling and Associates, you were right. They specialize in family law, specifically in high-stakes divorce, custody battles, and paternity cases." My hands trembled as I opened the envelope. Inside, I found a stack of glossy photographs. Each one was a fresh wound. Serafina and Marcus, their faces intimate, their bodies close, a stolen kiss in a shadowed doorway, a shared laugh over drinks, a tender embrace in a park. The dates on the back confirmed they spanned many months, right up to very recently. The visual proof was devastating, obliterating any last shred of hope that my initial conclusions had been wrong. "There's more," Thomas said, his voice even, but with a hint of gravity. "I looked into their finances. Serafina has been making several significant transfers from Arthur's joint savings accounts into an account solely in her name. And he paused, his gaze meeting mine directly. She's also been subtly inquiring about the market value of this house. Your house, Eleanor. My breath hitched. My home. My sanctuary. The place William and I had built our lives. She wasn't just planning to push me into a nursing home. She was planning to steal my home and my son's money. The audacity, the calculated cruelty of her actions was staggering. Then, Thomas pulled out a single sheet of paper from the envelope. This, he stated, his voice barely a whisper, is a draft agreement I managed to obtain from Mr. Sterling's office. It's a formal document outlining a financial settlement from Arthur in exchange for Marcus Thorne signing away all parental rights to the unborn child. The words swam before my eyes, blurring into an incomprehensible tangle. Parental rights. Unborn child. I repeated, my voice barely a croak. The horrifying truth, the one I had feared to even whisper, crashed down upon me with the force of a tidal wave. The baby. My grandchild. It wasn't Arthur's, it was Marcus's. Serafina had been carrying another man's child, deceiving my son, and planning to use him as a financial ATM, not just for herself, but to extort money from Marcus as well, all while planning to seize my home. The layers of her deception were breathtakingly evil. My son, my kind, trusting son, was caught in a web of deceit spun by a master manipulator. My mind, though reeling, snapped into action. This was no longer just about suspicion or hurt feelings. This was a battle for Arthur's future, for his financial security, for my home, and for the truth. I looked at Thomas, my eyes burning with a new, fierce determination. Thomas, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, I need one more piece of information. Absolute, irrefutable proof. I need certainty about that baby's paternity after it's born. The game had changed. The gloves were off. If you're still with me, please like this story, share it with your friends, and subscribe to hear how this all unfolds. You won't believe what happens next. Driving home after Thomas Miller's revelations, I felt as if the world had become a distorted, grotesque landscape. The familiar streets blurred into an unrecognizable canvas of betrayal. Serafina's cruel toast at the baby shower, her casual declaration about my room becoming the nursery, now echoed in my mind with a chilling new meaning. It wasn't just a rude remark, it was a deliberate pronouncement, a public foreshadowing of a meticulously crafted, calculated plan. My room, my home, my son's finances, even the very identity of my grandchild, all were pieces in Serafina's ruthless game. The depths of her deception were truly unfathomable. I found Arthur and Serafina in what used to be William's study, a room I had always envisioned as a quiet sanctuary, now stripped and basically cluttered with paint samples and baby furniture catalogs. Serafina, her heavily pregnant belly pronounced, was gesturing emphatically, directing Arthur as he struggled to assemble a complicated crib. "It's just too small, Arthur," she whined, her voice cutting through the quiet house. "How can we possibly fit a crib, a changing table, and a glider in here? It's absurd. We'll have to consider Eleanor's room. It's so much larger, and she hardly uses all that space, does she?" Her words, delivered with a casual air of inevitability, were no longer shocking, but a confirmation of the evil brewing beneath her sweet facade. I retreated silently to my own room, the manila envelope clutched tightly in my hand. The weight of the photographs, the financial documents, and the paternity agreement felt like lead. The nursery. My room. It wasn't just about a baby's space. It was about systematically dismantling my life in Arthur's, piece by piece. She wanted everything. She wanted to erase me completely. My gaze fell upon a cherished photograph on my nightstand. William, young and vibrant, holding a tiny swaddled Arthur in his arms, his face alight with boundless love and pride. A fierce, protective instinct ignited within me, burning away the days. I would not let her destroy what William and I had built, and I would certainly not let her shatter Arthur's life. I vowed then and there that I would fight for my son, for our home, and for the truth, no matter the con. Thomas had provided compelling evidence, but I needed absolute, irrefutable proof to confront Arthur. Proof that would leave no room for doubt. The only way to get that was a DNA test, and for that, I would have to wait until the baby was born. It was an agonizing decision requiring immense patience and strength, but it was the only path to justice. I would bide my time, play the waiting game, and collect that final crucial piece of evidence. The next 2 months passed in a surreal blur. I moved through the house like a ghost, observing, listening, collecting snippets of Serafina's elaborate lies. Her belly grew, a testament to the life growing within her, a life conceived in deceit. She continued her clandestine outings, her hushed phone calls, her saccharine sweetness for Arthur, and her barely veiled contempt for me. Arthur remained utterly oblivious, working longer hours, driven by the impending responsibility of fatherhood. He talked about new projects, promotions, the future he was building for their family. One evening, Arthur came home beaming, announcing a significant promotion and a substantial raise. Serafina, ever the performer, threw her arms around him, showering him with exaggerated praise and kisses. She then declared they must celebrate, insisting on opening an expensive bottle of champagne Arthur had been saving. "Oh, Arthur, I know I've been a little demanding lately with the pregnancy," she purred, batting her eyelashes, "but this makes all my sacrifices worth it. You're so amazing providing for us like this." I watched her, sipping my water, a bitter taste in my mouth. Her sacrifices were nothing but a carefully orchestrated charade to bleed him dry. The strain of living with the truth, unable to speak it, was immense. So I confided in Beatrice again, meeting her at the quiet cafe. "Beatrice," I whispered, my voice raw with emotion. "I have everything. Photographs, documents, Thomas's confirmation. But what if Arthur doesn't believe me? What if he sides with her? It could destroy our relationship forever." The thought of losing my son, even to the truth, was a tormenting fear. Beatrice reached across the table, taking my hand firmly. "Eleanor, look at me," she said, her eyes unwavering. "Thomas Miller is meticulous. He doesn't bring you flimsy evidence. What he has is solid. You have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the evidence. Arthur might be angry, he might be hurt, but eventually he will see the truth, and he will thank you for it." Her words were a much-needed balm, giving me the courage to continue. 2 weeks before her due date, the phone rang late one night. It was Arthur, his voice a mix of excitement and panic. "Mom, Serafina's gone into labor. We're at the hospital now. Can you bring her hospital bag? It's in the closet by the bed." My heart pounded with a mixture of dread and a grim sense of destiny. The moment I had been waiting for had arrived. I rushed to their bedroom, pulling open the closet door. Serafina's hospital bag, already packed, sat on a shelf. As I reached for it, a small, legal-looking envelope slid out from beneath a pile of baby blankets within the bag. My breath hitched. It was another draft agreement, eerily similar to the one Thomas had shown me, but this one was even more specific. It detailed financial terms, explicitly outlining monthly child support payments, a lump sum severance payment to Serafina from Arthur, and most damningly, a detailed visitation schedule for Marcus Thorne. And at the bottom, beneath a clearly defined financial settlement from Marcus to Serafina for signing away his parental rights, a small, familiar signature. Marcus Thorne. It was no longer a draft. It was an executed agreement. Serafina wasn't just planning. She was actively preparing for a future with Marcus and Arthur's money. I carefully tucked the document into my pocket, my face expressionless, my heart a leaden weight in my chest. I drove to the hospital, the evidence burning against my skin. The waiting room was filled with the usual nervous energy. Arthur spotted me, his face alight with a joy that felt like a cruel mockery. He rushed over, embracing me tightly. "Mom, she's doing great. The doctors say it won't be long now." He squeezed my hand, his eyes shining. "And Mom," he added, his voice thick with emotion, "we've decided. We're naming him William, after Dad." The name, my late husband's name, delivered with such innocent, joyous pride, landed like a physical blow. To name Marcus Thorne's child the child of deceit, after William, the epitome of honesty and integrity, was a profound, unbearable insult. The pain was so acute, so piercing, that I almost buckled. I forced a smile, a trembling, fragile thing as the world around me dissolved into a kaleidoscope of grief and rage. The time for waiting was almost over. The hospital room was bright, sterile, and filled with the overwhelming scent of antiseptic and new life. Arthur was beaming, his face a mask of exhausted joy. Serafina, though tired, looked triumphant, her eyes sparkling. And there, in a plastic bassinet, was baby William, my grandchild, or so I was told. When they finally allowed me to hold him, a complex mix of emotions washed over me. He was tiny, perfect, swaddled tightly in a soft blanket. He had Serafina's delicate chin and the same blonde fuzz on his head, but as I gazed into his unfocused eyes, a cold shiver ran down my spine. There was something in their shape, a subtle curve, a familiar depth, that unnervingly reminded me of Marcus Thorne. It was a fleeting impression, perhaps a trick of my mind, but it solidified my resolve. I had to know. For Arthur, for William's legacy, for my own peace. Later that afternoon, a nurse came in for the routine newborn screening, a heel prick to collect a blood sample. Arthur, ever the doting new father, watched, holding Serafina's hand. But as the nurse cleaned up, placing a small, used gauze pad onto the medical tray, a quick glance between Serafina and me confirmed she was distracted. Arthur had stepped out to grab a coffee. This was my chance. With a practiced ease, honed from years of subtle observations, I deftly palmed the gauze pad, tucking it into my pocket without anyone noticing. My heart thudded, a silent drumbeat of determination. As soon as I was alone, away from prying eyes, I called Thomas Miller. "I have the sample," I whispered, my voice trembling with a mix of relief and dread. He gave me the name of a reputable, discreet laboratory that specialized in confidential DNA testing. The next step was irreversible. Once the results were in, there would be no going back. The truth, once known, would shatter Arthur's carefully constructed world. But the alternative, letting Serafina continue her monstrous deception, was unthinkable. The next morning, I arrived at the hospital early, armed with 2 large coffees for Arthur. He looked haggard but ecstatic. "Mom, you're a lifesaver," he said, gratefully taking the mug. "I haven't slept a wink." I offered him a sympathetic smile. "Go home, dear," I urged gently. "Get some proper rest. I'll stay here with Serafina and baby William. I'd love to spend some time with my grandson." My words were laced with a hidden meaning only I understood. Arthur, too exhausted to argue, gratefully accepted, kissing Serafina and the baby goodbye before heading home. As soon as I knew Arthur was safely out of the hospital and likely on his way home, I made my move. I left the hospital, explaining to Serafina that I needed to run an urgent errand, promising to be back soon. I drove straight to the house. Arthur's hairbrush sat on his dresser. With a gloved hand, I carefully collected a few strands of hair, ensuring they had root follicles for a viable DNA sample. I placed them in a sterile plastic bag. Then, retrieving the gauze pad from my pocket, I packaged both samples meticulously, following the lab's instructions to the letter. A discreet, unmarked envelope held the potential to unravel everything. I drove directly to the FedEx office, opting for overnight delivery. The technician, a stoic woman with tired eyes, assured me results would be available in 3 days via a secure online portal. 3 days, an eternity. The next 72 hours felt like an agonizing stretch of time, each second dragging by with unbearable slowness. During this period, Serafina became uncharacteristically solicitous toward me. She complimented my outfit, asked for my advice on baby names, despite already naming him, and even inquired if I needed anything from the hospital cafeteria. It was a stark contrast to her usual dismissive attitude, and I knew exactly why. She sensed a shift, a quiet strength emanating from me, and she was trying to ensure I remained placid, unsuspecting, easy to manipulate. On the day before Serafina and baby William were to be discharged, she pulled out all the stops. "Eleanor," she cooed, her voice saccharine sweet, "you've been such a wonderful help, such a supportive grandmother." She handed me baby William, who was sleeping peacefully in his blanket. "Here, hold him. You deserve to spend some quality time with your grandson." I took the baby, my heart a complex mix of emotions. He was innocent, oblivious to the storm brewing around him. As I held him, Serafina leaned in conspiratorially. "And you know," she added, her voice dropping to a low, conspiratorial whisper, Once William starts sleeping through the night, we'll need to reassess the bedroom situation. The nursery is just too small, as I've said. Your room, I think, would be perfect. We can talk more about it then. The casual cruelty of her words, delivered while I held the innocent baby, solidified my resolve even further. She was relentless, unfeeling, and utterly determined to push me out. That evening, as the clock ticked past midnight, a new email notification flashed on my laptop screen. Results available. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic rhythm in the silent house. My hands trembled as I clicked the link, navigating to the secure portal. I entered the password Thomas had provided, each keystroke a momentous act. The screen loaded, and the clinical language of the report filled my vision. It was unambiguous, stark, and utterly devastating. DNA paternity test results, it read. Conclusion. The alleged father, Arthur Vance, is excluded as the biological father of the tested child. William Vance, the probability of paternity is 0%. 0%. The words hung in the air, cold, unyielding, undeniable. My breath caught in my throat. It was true. The baby, named William, was not Arthur's son. I printed the results, the paper sliding from the printer with a soft whir, a sound that felt deafening in the profound silence of the night. I read it again, confirming every horrifying word. My mind, usually so sharp, felt both numb and electrified. There was no doubt now. No room for error. I folded the paper carefully, placing it in a new clean envelope. I prepared myself for the next day, for the confrontation that would inevitably follow. How would Arthur react? Would he believe me? Or would Serafina's web of lies prove too strong to break? The dawn of a new, painful chapter was breaking, and I was ready. The sound of Arthur's car pulling into the driveway was the signal. My heart, which had been a drumbeat of anticipation for days, now thrummed with a nervous energy that transcended fear. This was it, the moment of truth. I heard Serafina's saccharine voice, overly sweet, cooing, "Welcome home, little William. This is your house now." A declaration filled with an insidious possessiveness that grated on my ears. I met them at the door, my expression carefully neutral, betraying none of the turmoil within. "Welcome home," I said, my voice calm, offering to take their overflowing bags. Arthur, looking tired but radiating a father's pride, handed me a bulging duffel. Serafina, her arm draped possessively around the bassinet, just smiled, a self-satisfied smirk playing on her lips. As she passed, her phone, perched precariously on top of the baby carrier, vibrated. My eyes, ever watchful, caught a glimpse of the notification. A text from Marcus Kew. The confirmation was a final bitter drop in an already overflowing cup. "Mom," Arthur said, oblivious to the storm brewing, his voice soft with emotion. "Come sit. Look at him. He has your eyes, doesn't he?" He gestured to the living room where the bassinet was now carefully placed. I sat, my gaze fixed on the baby, on Arthur's loving face, and then finally on Serafina, whose sweet mask was beginning to fray at the edges. "Arthur," I began, my voice steady, though my hands trembled slightly in my lap. "I love you more than anything in this world. And because I love you, and because it's my duty as your mother, I have to protect you from something truly terrible." My gaze locked onto Serafina, stripping away all pretense. "Serafina, your web of lies ends today." Her eyes narrowed, a flash of pure malice replacing her feigned sweetness. "What are you talking about, Eleanor? Are you finally losing your mind?" "I'm talking about Marcus Thorne," I stated, each word a stone dropped into a still pond. "I'm talking about your secret meetings with him, your meetings at Sterling and Associates, the family law firm. You're moving Arthur's money into your own accounts, your inquiries about the value of my house." Serafina let out a theatrical laugh, a harsh, brittle sound. "This is ridiculous. Absolutely absurd. You're obsessed, Eleanor, just jealous and bitter. You're making all this up because you don't want me and Arthur to be happy, or because you're worried about your room becoming the nursery." Her voice rose, shrill and indignant, trying to paint me as the villain. Arthur looked from her to me, confused, his smile fading. I ignored her histrionics. From my pocket, I calmly withdrew the folded DNA report, the paper feeling significant and heavy. This, I said, placing it on the coffee table between them, is not ridiculous, Serafina. This is science. This is the truth. Arthur stared at the document, his brow furrowed. "What is this, Mom?" he asked, his voice laced with bewilderment. He instinctively clutched baby William tighter to his chest, as if shielding him from an unseen danger. Serafina's eyes widened, a flicker of genuine fear crossing her face before she quickly replaced it with outrage. "How dare you? What is this trickery? You're trying to undermine our family, Eleanor. You're trying to destroy everything." She lunged for the paper, but I gently placed my hand on it, preventing her. "Read it, Arthur," I urged, my voice firm. "Read it yourself." Arthur picked up the report, his gaze sweeping over the clinical language. His face drained of color as his eyes landed on the damning conclusion. The alleged father, Arthur Vance, is excluded as the biological father. The probability of paternity is 0%. His hand, still clutching the baby, began to tremble violently. The paper slipped from his fingers, fluttering to the floor. Serafina, seeing the undeniable evidence in his eyes, panicked. "It's a lie! It's fake! Eleanor doctored it! She hates me! She hates us!" she shrieked, her voice cracking. But Arthur wasn't looking at her. His gaze, bewildered and heartbroken, was fixed on the innocent face of the baby in his arms. I didn't let her continue her charade. From another pocket, I pulled out Thomas Miller's envelope. "This," I stated, my voice devoid of emotion, "is more proof, Arthur, from a private investigator. Photographs, financial records, and this," I added, producing the signed agreement I had found in her hospital bag, "is the signed agreement between Serafina and Marcus Thorne, outlining the financial settlement for his parental rights and his visitation schedule." Arthur opened the envelope, his fingers fumbling. He saw the photographs. Serafina and Marcus, intimately entwined, some clearly taken while she was heavily pregnant. He saw the detailed bank transfers. And then he saw the agreement, the signatures of Serafina and Marcus, the cold, calculated terms of their deal. The truth, undeniable and brutal, smashed into him with full force. The fight drained from Serafina's eyes. Her shoulders slumped. The game was up. "Yes," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper, defeat etched onto her face. "Yes, William is Marcus's biological child." "But what does it matter, Arthur? We can still be a family. He's just a sperm donor, Arthur. You love him, don't you?" Arthur looked at her, truly looked at her, as if seeing her for the very first time. His face was a mask of grief and fury. "You lied to me," he said, his voice raw, heartbroken. "You used me. You planned all of this. You took my money, and you were going to take my mother's home for another man's child. All while you were still seeing him, even in a hotel." His voice broke on the last word. "You're a monster, Serafina. A despicable, manipulative monster." "The DNA doesn't matter," Serafina tried again, desperately, her voice rising in a last-ditch effort to salvage her plan. "He's still our baby, Arthur. We can make this work." But Arthur didn't even respond. He turned his head slowly, his eyes, red-rimmed and filled with tears, met mine. In their depths, I saw not anger, but a profound understanding, a realization of my silent struggle, my unwavering protection. He saw that I had known and that I had done this for him. "Get out," Arthur choked, his voice trembling but firm. "Get out of my house. Tonight. Go to Marcus." Serafina, her face contorted with rage, stormed upstairs. "You'll regret this, Arthur," she screamed, her voice echoing through the silent house. "I'll take everything. I'll sue you for child support, for emotional distress. You'll be sorry." Arthur merely looked up at the ceiling, where her footsteps thundered. "And I'll sue you for fraud, Serafina," he retorted, his voice surprisingly strong despite his pain. "Fraud and emotional abuse. You won't get a dime." As Serafina's furious movements upstairs faded, Arthur slumped onto the sofa, the tiny baby still cradled in his arms, his body shaking with silent sobs. I knelt beside him, placing a gentle hand on his back. His tears fell onto the baby's blanket. "Oh, Arthur," I whispered, My own eyes filled with tears. My brave boy. He leaned into me, seeking comfort, finally seeing the true villain in his life. The future was uncertain, messy, and painful, but we would face it together. 6 months had passed since the devastating confrontation in my living room. The legal battles, fueled by Serafina's desperate attempts to cling to her ill-gotten gains, had concluded with surprising swiftness. Detective Miller's meticulously gathered evidence, the photographs, the financial records, the paternity agreement, and of course the undeniable DNA results, presented an ironclad case of fraud. The judge, a no-nonsense woman who saw through Serafina's histrionics, dismissed her claims entirely. Serafina left the courthouse with nothing. No alimony from Arthur, no child support for a child who was not his, and a tarnished reputation. The financial transfers had been reversed, and the inquiries about my house's value were exposed as part of her calculated scheme. Justice, cold and unequivocal, had been served. Today, I stood in William's former office, a room that had once held his quiet dignity, then the temporary sterile promise of a nursery, and was now being transformed once again. This time, it was for me. Arthur, paint roller in hand, was carefully applying a soft, creamy white to the walls. He had suggested it, a quiet offering of apology and renewal. "It'll be perfect for your art studio, Mom," he'd said, a tentative smile on his face. He turned to me, his gaze earnest. "I was so blind, Mom," he admitted, his voice laced with regret, but also a new maturity. "So unbelievably stupid. I wanted a family so badly after Dad died. I wanted to believe in Serafina, to believe she was everything I needed. I let my desperation blind me to the truth, to her cruelty." He sighed, running a hand through his hair. "I should have listened to you. I should have seen it." "You loved her, Arthur," I said gently. "You trusted her. That's not stupidity, that's humanity. She exploited your good nature, but you saw it eventually, and you stood up to her." Arthur had spent these past months rebuilding. His finances, temporarily depleted by Serafina's manipulations, were slowly recovering. His career was back on track. For now, he had moved back into his old room, the one he had occupied as a boy, a temporary retreat as he figured out his next steps. The unspoken chasm that Serafina had created between us had healed, replaced by a quiet understanding and a deeper, more resilient bond. "Don't forget the garden club meeting tonight," I reminded him, a playful glint in my eye. "Beatrice is making her famous lemon bars." He grinned, the first genuine smile I'd seen on his face in a long time. Wouldn't miss it for the world, especially the lemon bars. The garden club. It had started as a simple gathering of local senior women, a shared love for hydrangeas and roses bringing us together. But over the past year, it had blossomed into something more profound. A community, a sisterhood. It was a place of solidarity, support, and unexpected empowerment. Each of us, in our own way, had navigated life's challenges, and our shared experiences forged an unbreakable bond. Judge Holloway, one of our newest and liveliest members, had just announced exciting news at our last meeting. "Eleanor," Judge Holloway had boomed, her voice carrying across the chatter of the room, "the Senior Center is looking for someone to lead weekly art classes. Watercolors, pastels, anything you'd like. And your name immediately came to mind. What do you say?" My heart had fluttered. Art, my forgotten passion buried under years of teaching, of wifehood, of motherhood, and then of grief. The idea filled me with a mixture of trepidation and exhilarating excitement. I'd be honored," I had stammered, a blush rising to my cheeks. It was terrifying, yet thrilling, to consider rediscovering that part of myself. "You look truly happy, Eleanor," Margaret, another garden club member, observed tonight, as we sat together, chatting over tea. I paused, considering her words. Happiness. It was a feeling I hadn't truly allowed myself to feel in so long. And I realized with a surprising surge of clarity that she was right. I was happy, not despite what had happened, but because of it. Serafina's cruelty, her attempts to erase me, had inadvertently pushed me to reclaim my voice, my space, my very self. It was a strange, bittersweet irony. Later, as the evening drew to a close, Arthur and Beatrice and I sat on the back porch, the soft glow of the garden lights illuminating our faces. The air was filled with the gentle hum of crickets and the comforting scent of honeysuckle. It was a simple dinner, but it felt rich, imbued with the strength of a bond that had been tested and found resilient. I actually enrolled in a business management course, Arthur confided, his voice a little shy. Just online for now, thinking about starting my own firm eventually. He paused, then added, and I'm cautiously dating someone new. Her name's Clara. She's a librarian, and she's incredibly kind. A warmth spread through my chest. My son was healing. He was finding his footing again. And Mom, he said, turning to me, a mischievous twinkle in his eye, no matter what happens, no one is ever sending you to a nursing home. And if anyone ever suggests your room for a nursery again, I promise I'll personally defend you, with a paint roller, if necessary. We laughed, a genuine, heartfelt sound that echoed in the quiet night. I looked out at the garden, at the familiar shapes of the trees and flowers bathed in moonlight. At 65, I was beginning a new joyful chapter. I was no longer Eleanor, the grieving widow, or Eleanor, the accommodating mother-in-law. I was Eleanor, the artist. Eleanor, the friend. Eleanor, the woman who had found her voice and reclaimed her life. I felt William's presence, a comforting warmth, as if he were smiling down at me, proud. Tomorrow would bring new beginnings, new art, new friendships, and a renewed purpose. And this time I wouldn't make myself small for anyone.